And welcome back. Hopefully you had a delicious meal. Darren, how was your meal?
It was great. I had a Belforian banana.
Nice. Yeah, hey, 10 points. That's beautiful.
Start as you win.
Yeah. Welcome back. This is Microsoft Virtual Academy for exam 70485. This is Advanced Windows Store App Development with C#, refresh for Windows 8.1. Thank goodness she showed me that. That's so great. And
we're here with Module 4.
we are here with Module 4.
And we're going to be talking about reusable control.
Let's talk about reusable controls
Let's do that
and
instead.
components.
Let's do that instead.
All right. Let's do that. So when we talk about reusability, one of the things you can reuse is, just like last module, styles and things like that, just by moving up the scope. We showed for just a second changing the look of an app, or a look of a button, or any control that has a template. We can go in, inject a new set of XAML to change the way that it looks.
Yep. And we showed that in more detail in the Essentials section, where we kind of did a bit more of a session around styles.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so we have, in XAML, we could separate two types of reusable controls. The first one would be custom controls, and the second would be user controls.
Yep.
Is there something else? A custom control is, so the difference is very easy, actually.
Yeah.
The custom controls, a custom control does not have XAML to say what it's going to look like. It only has implementation to say what it's going to do. So, for example, a text box is a custom control. A text box doesn't have any look at all. It only has all of its operational logic.
Well, it's certainly not encapsulated within the control definition itself. It does reference something.
Well, in the case of dragging it over from a text box onto your canvas, its look and feel is injected by the system, and then of course you can override that. The opposite, or not the opposite, but in contrast to that, is the user control.
Yes.
A user control also has all of the logic that says how it's going to operate, but it includes the XAML as well. And so as
it's packaged together as a XAML file and a code behind.
it makes it much easier to use to just drag on a user control and bam.
A great design time experience.
Gives it a lot less control as far as templating it. If you wanted to change the way user control looks, you're very, very limited. You have to really kind of split the atom to get that to work.
Yep.
So if you're trying to create a user control, if you're trying to create a control that you allow the developer to have it look any way that they want, you're probably going to go along the lines of a custom control.
If you're building SDKs, those kind of things.
That's right. And but if you're trying to create a set of controls or a single control that's super easy and fast to use, easy on design time, and doesn't need a lot of UI configuration, a user control is the right way to do it.
And it's very similar in sort of concept in reality to ASP.NET Web Forms and user controls and the controls in there. That you could create these reusable elements of HTML with code behind capability.
That's right.
Or you could create something that was completely
Server
lookless.
controls.
Server controls, you're exactly right.
Yeah, that's right. This is an ASP.NET class for a moment.
Indeed.
All right. We also have, and we'll talk about it in a moment, this idea of WinRT controls. Or not controls, but WinRT components, which can contain controls. So let's talk about practically the custom control. In XAML, you're really subclassing something that already exists. If you want to go all the way bare bones, one of the things you can do is you can subclass the control class. That is, I mean, you can't get any more basic than that, but it does mean you won't get any sort of implementation given to you. I could also subclass, let's say, the text box. In fact, the demo we're about to show does subclass the text box. So I inherit all of its functionality, and then I can extend it, or I can override it as well. I can template this all we want, and what makes it hard is you don't get templates out of the, right out of it. You have to either include them in a linked dictionary, or, well, that's really all you can do.
Yeah.
And perfect. So there it is on the right. In this case, the sample is inheriting from button, and what it's doing is including a watermark. And of course, you don't have to do that anymore.
Nope.
No, now it's not called watermark though in the new text.
Placeholder text.
Placeholder text. That's right. And beautiful. Well, that demo, we should have just tweaked it a little.
We probably should have.
We'll make sure that the live demo is more practical because It will be. All right, XAML user controls. In contrast, they come with all the layout and composition ready. All the XAML ships with it, packaged together. It's almost like a baby-sized page, to be honest.
Indeed.
You really cannot template it. You may be smart enough to do it, but that doesn't mean you should. It's just that's not what they're designed to do.
Exactly, and I think that's the key point. These exist to make it very simple to encapsulate reusable elements of XAML and behavior.
Yeah.
If you really don't want to reuse the XAML, then do a custom control.
A user control is similar to a data template. It is a reusable UI, with the exception of a user control can also include logic behind it, where a data control really can, or a data template cannot. Where we said a custom control can inherit from an existing control or from control, a XAML user control is going to inherit from user control.
Yep.
And that's just a requirement, right? Just a requirement. Or
I guess a derivative of user control.
I suppose you could. That's weird.
You could cascade down. You can have a relationship of user controls, I guess.
That's weird. I've never seen that. I've never. I guess you could. I mean, I know you can, but it's weird nonetheless. It requires the full implementation, where a custom control more typically doesn't just inherit from control, so you get a lot with it. You have to do everything kind of sort of from scratch when you do a user control. Usually that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point.
It's a decent design pattern where you encapsulate all of your logic and can hand it around so you can have your smartest developer build it and your other team developers use it that way. Okay.
I think one of the points as well on here was around binding. You still have to go down the path of using dependency properties and so on if you actually want to expose out binding.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You can't bind to a CLR property even though it's in a user control.
Yes.
You can only bind to the type of properties that support binding, and that's a dependency property.
Yeah. So it's not a shortcut there.
It is not. It is not at all. So this is going to be our demo. You want to do it?
No, over to you.
Just kidding. All right, so I am going to, I'll bring up Visual Studio. You know what? I like doing things from a blank canvas. So here is Visual Studio. I'm feeling good. We had lunch. All the demos are going to be just slamming good.
It'll be peachy.
That's right. Okay, blank canvas, blank app, nothing special in here, no magic for you to figure out. You could do this right along with me. You want me to make a user control first, or you want me to make a custom control first?
Let's do a custom control, and let's start from generic.xaml.
Let's put all the controls in a folder called controls, because no reason not to take extra time for things that don't really matter in a demo.
Indeed. But you're so OCD, you would change it partway through, which would probably break something.
It's great. That is great. Yeah, I guess your mic's still on.
Indeed.
Okay. A custom control, which is what we're about to create, doesn't have any XAML, so really it's just a class. So I can say add new class, and that's all I really need. I'm going to make a text box, and I'm going to make it so that when there's no text in it, it is red. When it does have text in it, then we'll just go back to the standard white. Yeah, that'll be the easiest. So we'll
now, if you wanted to inherit some of the capability of a text box, but not necessarily all of the capability, you could move up the inheritance tree from text box to one of its predecessors. Yeah.
As long as the functionality is there, absolutely. There's no reason I don't. Right here, I'm going to say text box and make sure the using is there. But you're right. I could go on up, and if I was curious where it came from, I could hit F12. And go straight to control. So that's pretty much everything is in the text box implementation. But a good idea. So if I did have a richer framework, I was
like
hitting
buttons.
against.
Buttons inherit from button base, and you could, in theory, derive from button base.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the only thing I want to do here is if the text is empty. That's all I'm going to do. So I'll set up a handler to listen to the text change event, and I'll put that in the constructor here. And I will say this dot changed, just where we are. There we are.
Changed.
Text changed, and then I'll just create a quick handler where the logic will be. So what's nice is this will feel just like a text box because I'm subclassing it right here, but it'll have just one extra feature, completely transparent to the user. And I'll show you one little trick here in just a second. So every time the text changes, I say if string dot and then I'll use is nor white space, so then even a space will do. No, we'll just do empty and keep to the plan. This dot text, right? So if the text is null or empty, then I'm going to change the background. Whose background do I change? Its very own, so I'll say this dot background equals, and the background is actually a solid color brush, not a color. New solid color brush, and pass in colors. A lot of usings I'm adding here.
Yep. And so whilst you're doing that, if we wanted to make this more customizable, you could expose the background or the error color as a dependency property that somebody could actually then supply in the design time.
Yeah, you're right. I could easily do that. You want to do that?
Why not?
Oh gosh, because you're not doing this demo is why. All right, great. So I'm going to go create a quick property right here. It doesn't have to be dependency in this case.
Yes.
All I need to do is read it. It'll be of type color, and it'll be called error color, just like you said. And so I will make sure that it has a default color first of all.
Yeah.
And so I'll say this dot error color equals colors dot pink. There we go. So now the default color will be pink whenever the text is empty. And if it's not empty, just the else here, I'll have it, again, I could do this with a property, but for the sake of not doing it with a property, I'll say colors.white. Now I'm still taking the literal of pink. I need to reference the color here. So I'll just say, take out colors.pink and say this dot error color. So now, just like you said, I created it so it is a configurable color. Changes the background to whatever that is. This will be nice because we can talk about the built-in converter to XAML while we do it.
Absolutely.
I'll hit F6. Everything seems to be working, but there's still one more step. There's no UI, right? This is absolutely zero UI.
So you can either build your own and create it in generic.xaml in a folder called themes.
Or I can tell it now to go ahead and use the old text box style or the base text box style. And I'll do it right here in the constructor. I'll say this dot default style key. So the default style key is how every style you create targets a type.
Yep.
And so this is faking the type that this control is going to be. So it says if there's a style using this other type, use it as well. So I'll say this dot default style key is type of text box. So now it'll use the style of the text box even though this isn't a text box at all.
So if we were using, say, generic.xaml in this scenario, could we put a style in there and say based on the text box style and have it associated with this type?
Yeah, absolutely you could. In fact, if I was creating a style just for this red text box, then, in fact, we'll leave it. Now it's not red. That's what, I'm like, well, it's not really red anymore. Then I don't have to set this default key at all.
Yep.
Now I can target it as red text box, and from that point forward, it'll go forward. This is just if I want to leverage something that I can allow either the system to inject or something that I've already got defined in my styles.
Excellent.
Makes it so. This is an important step that would make your control not work if you don't know it. No doubt. I'm going to hit F6 to go ahead and let it build. Now when I go over to my main page and look at my toolbox, the toolbox includes my red text box right here. I'll drag that over, and it looks just like a text box, which is great. And so I'll go down and I'll add a regular text box right below it, which will just be standard. Both of them have their type as their native text. That's interesting. I didn't think it would do that. So I'll hit F5, and they'll both be white. The background will be white. Well, actually, the text box default color wasn't white, so I could have actually read the style. I could go in and read it that way. But we'll let it go ahead and be red and white for now. And so now I go to the text box at the bottom. I'll clear it to blank, and as soon as I do, you can see no change. It's the standard behavior that you would expect. I can still interact with this just like it's a text box, but as soon as I clear it back to blank, it changes it to pink. This would be a nice indicator in the user for the user.
Yep.
Right?
Okay.
So many other things you obviously
want to show
do.
changing your property and changing that color, changing your error?
Yeah, I sure do. I sure do appreciate you mentioning that and having me change it in the middle like that. That's great. All right, so if I say error color, it'll be the one at the top, not the one at the bottom. If I say ERRR error color, I can set it right here to be whatever it is that I want. Yeah. And one of the things I can change it to is let's say I choose green, but what it's really looking for is a colors.green. It sees it's enumerable, but XAML knows the type that it's expecting, and it does the type conversion for me.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it really is nice. Sort of like what you showed yesterday with margin, how you could say number, comma, number, comma, number, and it does the translation into thickness for them. So if I were to go ahead and run this again, and I were to clear out the red text box, it will turn to green.
Excellent.
Nice. The standard green actually looks almost exactly like the MVA green.
Almost.
It's very, very close.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a custom control. I don't include any XAML with it. All I do is manipulate the implementation. Lots of neat things you can do, especially with the out-of-the-box. I don't know of any that are sealed, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I think you can
There used to be a lot of sealed in the other flavors of XAML, but I really don't know.
You know what surprises me about that is I thought that all the XAML controls came from WinRT where everything had to be sealed.
Yeah.
My mind is blown right now.
Exactly.
Absolutely blown. Okay, let's do a user control. So I'm going to create a user control. It'll be a stars rating control. This is one of my favorite things to do. So first of all, I need some stars. So I will, I'll use Design, one of my favorite little applications. It's a free download from MSDN. And it is a retired product.
Which is a shame.
It is a shame. And I like it because it allows me to build a out a vector-based UI and then export it to XAML. And so I'll go ahead and do it for that, right? I still use it. I use this constantly. And so I can create a rectangle, ellipse, or polygon. And as soon as I do, it knows what I want because it reads my mind.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Neat. It might be that I prepared for this demo and this is what the previous shape was. But you can change the number of points so it's whatever you want it to be. And you can also change its depth so it's not quite as much or it's more, right? Kind of looks like the, kind of reminds me of Mercedes.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Put a circle around it.
Yeah.
Done.
All right, let's use a 4-point star. No, that's weird. Let's use a 5-point star. It's much nicer. And so I'll bring this down so it fits nicely in this little area. I chose the size, by the way, of this canvas, and so it's just nice. I'm going to duplicate this so I have 2 stars side by side.
You're just dragging it with an Alt or something?
I am dragging it with an Alt. That's exactly right. I'll drag it again. And usually a rating system has 5 stars, so I'll just create one more. And so now I have all 5 stars. I'll go over here just so I can, now they fit nicely. So 5 stars inside my little box of whatever size that is. I don't remember.
Arbitrary size.
Yeah, it's arbitrary, exactly. And it can be slightly off. It doesn't really impact the fact that it's a user control. In fact, now suddenly it's cool looking. I'll do it just like that.
See, that looks like it's been designed.
This is where pride in craftsmanship really comes into play.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so these are 5 different stars. So for example, if I were to go up and apply a linear gradient, you can see black starts at each of the stars is left and goes to white. That's not what I want. Instead, I'm going to select all 5 stars and go and do a quick path operation to make a compound path, basically combining them all to be a single object instead of 5 separate objects. So now I have one object that looks like 5 stars. If I were to apply a gradient now, you can see black starts over here and goes all the way across. Actually, it doesn't. What's going on here? Let's try this one more time.
It's feeling.
This time with feeling?
Yes.
Well, wait a minute. I'm still not happy about this. I'm going to back it up so that they're not together again. I'll say object. Well, this is great. This is great. If it wasn't for changing it to green on the other one, it would
exactly. That has directly influenced this completely unrelated activity.
I honestly, what's going on? All right, let's try it again. All right, compound path, make. Let's try it with just 2. Now it still doesn't do it. Now I'm just frustrated by the entire thing. I'm so frustrated. It's such a great demo.
It worked perfectly last night.
It totally did. It's not like I haven't done this a dozen times. We're going to do this with one giant star. Doggone it. This is
or you could revert back to the pre-canned.
I'm not doing it. The canned, no. I'm going to have 2 stars. Now I'll combine those 2. Watch, it'll totally work for no reason. Watch this. Object, compound path, make. Now I can put it in, and it. Look. Why that shouldn't have worked either. All right, wait a minute. Now I can.
Now you have to fix it, and time is a ticking.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
It's a 2-star rating system.
Here's instead of talking about it, look, I can just go and make these stars really quickly now. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There you go, 5 stars. I'll select them all, say object, compound path, make, and give it a linear gradient, and they all have it. All I have to do is do it. If you do it fast, it works every time.
Yeah, if you don't think, then it's perfect.
All right, so I'm making a star rating control. That's the reason we have stars anyway. I'll take away the outline. No, I'll leave the outline. That's kind of nice. I'll leave an outline. And one cool thing about a linear gradient is right here, when the closer the offsets are to the 2 gradient stops, the more tight the line is that's being created. Right now it's a very feathered line, but as I get them closer and closer, you can see that line kind of gets tighter and tighter. I'll leave it at that because I want to bind to it.
Ah, it almost looks like something's moving across there.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I'm headed.
Oh.
Yeah, you kind of took the whole thunder away from me, but it's all right. It's no big deal.
That's okay.
I'll change the black to gold, and I'll change the white to kind of a gray color just so I don't have to change them later. Here's what's cool. I can select the whole thing, go up to Edit, and when I do, I can say Copy or I can say Copy XAML. I love doing this. All right, there's Copy XAML. I'm going to right-click inside Controls here and add a new item. Intentionally, I'll pick a user control that I'm going to rename to Stars.
That seems intelligent.
STARS, just like that. And because it's just XAML, I can go down and just paste it the way I would kind of hope I would. There it is. Just like that. Just like... I pasted it outside the grid, by the way.
Which seems unintentional.
I wanted to show what would happen if you did. As you can see, things happen. All right, so there are two gradient stops in our linear gradient that I created. I'm going to give each of them a name so that I can refer to them from code behind.
Great.
With a quick name of, let's say, call it grad1.
So you're using X name as opposed to name?
I am. Why would I use X name instead of name?
So that it's available in your code behind.
Oh boy, that's so true. All right. All right, there they are. Everything's nice. And I want to bind to this. So I'm inside the scope of my user control. I want to create a property that I can bind to.
And so a regular CLR property?
So I will use a regular CLR property if I want it to fail. Instead, I want to use a...
Dependency property.
Dependency property. Yes, thank you. That's exactly right. If I want a CLR property, it's prop tab tab. If I want a dependency property, it's prop dp tab tab. It does most of the work for me. The type that I want here is double, just like so.
Yeah.
But I'd spell it correctly. And it would be called, let's call it rating. This is the rating that it is.
Okay.
I'll tab over, and one of the things that a dependency property has is a reference to the type of class that it's going to be attached to, just the way that it works. This one is called stars, just like we named it earlier. And then it also has a default value if I want to set it. I don't want a default value here, so I'll just set it to null. I know I'll be binding to it. You might have a default value in yours. If you do, just fantastic.
Yep.
The other change I'm going to make is in the setter. Once this value is set, I want to set that grad1 and grad2's offset so that they match it. Now, if I set them exactly the same, so here we go, grad1 offset. If I set them exactly the same, then that line will be very, very distinct. So equals value, and then just like the line above, I'll say grad2 offset. I'm done. This is the full implementation of the rating control. In all reality, if I had taken more time to make it prettier, this is complete. It's really interesting. I can also make this two-way binding so that as the user taps in different locations, I calculate how far in they are, and I set the rating back, and it updates my view model that'll be bound to.
And obviously you've made this a very fine-grained rating control, so it could be 3.100007 stars.
I could.
You could change it obviously over to be to actually move it in steps and so on.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Just like I had my red text box in my toolbox, as soon as I build, stars shows up as well. I come over and drag that out, and it looks just like I would want it to. This is, by the way, exactly what I want it to look like. And so I'll have a
the artistic
slider.
Distribution of varying star sizes, I think, actually really speaks to the aesthetic you're striving for.
It is sort of neat, right? Kind of stars and stripes. And so here's a slider. I don't want to create a view model right now. I just want to impact it, bind it to something. So we'll use element binding. And so the easiest way for me to do this is to go into the slider itself, go to its properties and down to, let's do some basic setup first, because we know we want to go from 0 to 1 as far as a gradient is concerned. So I will say its minimum is 0, but I'll change its maximum to 1. Here's one of the places I could change its step frequency. I'll make it very, very gradient of 0.01. But then we'll go down to what the value is currently set to, and I'll simply bind it using create data binding right here. But I'll switch it over to an element name and find my stars. Here's my stars, and I'll drag that down to, you know what? I think I did it wrong. I didn't do it wrong, but I want to bind it the other way so I can do a quick copy and show you this. When I go over to my stars control and I say rating, it shows up just because that's how I've defined it, even though it's a custom property. Let me bind it instead, and I'll show you what I'll do. I'll say element name. I'll see the grid right here, and there's the slider. I'm just going to bind it really quickly to
the value.
The value, right, just like that. I don't need to cause it to be two-way this way. That's what I didn't want to do. And so now I'll run it, and as soon as I do, as soon as, what's going on right there? As soon as I do, doggone, right after lunch? No, hang on.
Food coma.
Hang on. No, that's not right. Here are the two gradients called grad 1 and grad 2. They both have an offset.
It's not the offsets, yes. You're supposed to be moving the...
And then from behind, I set grad 1 and grad 2 offset to the value, which is the double being passed in, as the rating. And it is bound, the rating then is bound to the value of the slider. Oh, boy.
Open the solution.
That's all you have to do, by the way.
It is all you have to do, but you're clearly doing something.
Wait, no. Just let me look one more time. I'm so disappointed that is not, hang on. Let me look at the main value. You look at it with me. Here's the slider. Here's the stars control. The stars control has a rating over here on the right who is bound to value of the slider. That's 100% right.
Do you have the parameter, the metadata information to fire the event on the change of the dependency property to apply the binding?
Yeah, because I did it in the setter.
In the CLR setter, not the.
That is so. All right, I will jump over to the canned one.
Yeah.
But it's going to be implemented the same. Is what's crazy. I've just had
not if it
two
works.
things that were bad luck. Doggone it. All right, here's the reusable control. The two controls. Here's stars. I'm going to look at it anyway, because here they are. It looks exactly the same. There's nothing here. No, it'd be in the code behind. Well, I will say it's grad 1 and grad 2. Gradient. Oh, here it's called gradient 1. Oh, gosh. And then code behind, not in the setter, just like you said.
Yeah.
I did it in the stupid change event.
Exactly.
Well, it's worth showing why, because
yes.
That is frustrating. Over here where I said I don't have...
So just so everybody understands, the setters aren't invoked. Those are invoked if you access it as a CLR property.
You're 100%
They're
right.
not invoked if you're actually going through binding. And so you have to leverage the changed event to actually
Okay, so I had deleted property metadata, saying I didn't need a default.
Yeah.
But property metadata is also where you wire up the change event.
Correct.
Blast it all. So I'll go ahead and say null is my default value, but the next thing it asks is the changed event. Oh, man. Burned again. And so right here in the changed event is where I set grad 1 and grad 2, but first, because it's static, I need to cast the sender in as the stars control.
Yep.
So I'll just say var s, which is stars, equals d, which is passed into me as the sender, as stars. So now that it's stars, I have a reference to the actual instantiated event, and I can say s.grad1 offset. And it's not to value, oh boy, it's to, what's the arg's name here? It's to e.new value.
New value.
E.new value, exactly. Both of those come back as objects, so I'll need to cast them as a double, just like so. Now it will work the way it should have worked the entire time. I'll hit F5 and you'll see. I had to go to my own code. That's the way it goes. Now you can see it goes up and down.
Yep.
I could have set the put in a default value. That's
put in 0 as a
but
default.
since I said null, it didn't set it back. But now it stays lined up with me just right.
Yep.
Because this is the core thing, and kind of what I was hoping to be able to show is because it's a user control. When I go to main page, I can drag it again and again and again. Right. So I could add. Here's another one. And I could manipulate it, say I want it to be vertical instead, or let me flip it over so it kind of goes up and so it feels like a thermometer. Now I can use the same thing. The binding is the same because I copied them and goes up and down. You can make it fit whatever the UI is you need it to. So, two types of reusable controls. The first one is the custom control, which is basically customizing the implementation of an existing control or creating a control with a very variable and templatable UI that doesn't come with the XAML. Or creating, like I did here, a user control that includes all of the XAML and the implementation and can be reused and only slightly manipulated on the canvas.
Excellent. Awesome job.
I'm glad we recovered. I'm glad I recovered. Let's just say it. All right.
Okay, now
controls versus components.
Yes. So there's always been the concept of reusable components in the Windows operating system. They have been and will probably always remain. COM, Component Object Model.
Components.
Indeed. We're here all day.
Best joke ever.
Indeed. And you've always been able to consume COM components from within C# and the .NET language. It hasn't always been easy to do so because those COM components generally come in as objects. They're not strongly typed objects. They don't have metadata that you can easily understand and grok unless you import type libraries and so on. I remember back in the day when Visual Studio Tools for Office first came out.
Yeah.
And one of its primary things that it did was give you a library that allowed you to much better interact with the Office component object
Kind
model.
of a wrapper that made it typed instead of a nightmare.
And actually, I think that activity drove a number of capabilities into the language, such as optional parameters and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Because by default, often your COM signatures may have hundreds of elements.
Yeah.
You know, for I remember Word.open or Word.save, when you're trying to save documents and so on, they have many, many, many different options that you could supply, and you'd have to supply a number of default values. And so that was pretty difficult to do. Now, when the Windows sort of runtime, Windows RT, was developed, it really intended to be much closer to the metal, the operating system, the underlying capabilities of the operating system, than the .NET framework was. There was a lot of layers of abstraction introduced in the .NET framework. So one of the great things that WinRT does very well is it's very, very fast, and it's very fast because it speaks directly to the operating system components.
It is not another framework that you're sitting on top of.
No.
It truly is the operating system.
Yeah. Now, how was that achieved? We kind of mentioned it, I think, a little bit in the Essentials sessions the previous day, but really we talked about this, excuse me, concept of projections and how the really neat capability of this environment was the projections from the underlying operating system components into a particular native language or a particular language implementation, such as C#, so that we can consume these operating system components as if they were members of the C# and .NET environment.
Yeah.
The other great thing about that is this type projection works across all the different languages, including JavaScript, so that you can, again, interact with those capabilities as if they were native JavaScript objects, as if they were native Visual Basic objects, or, in fact, C++. Pretty neat.
It is really neat, actually. A lot of people don't know how the moving parts underneath and how complex they really are.
Indeed, indeed. Which, I guess, goes to show that they've done a great job.
Yeah, that's right. Abstract away the complexity.
So, you know, and that's also, to a certain extent, why some things that were very familiar to us in .NET have changed a little bit. And that's because, you know, they need to better align with the underlying operating system. And so that's why we have some of the different namespaces that we do and so on. The other great thing about this is we can take advantage of that same type projection system to actually create reusable components that can span the same language set.
That's right.
You know, we can leverage C++, C#, and Visual Basic to create these reusable components. The only member that can't play in that particular environment is JavaScript. JavaScript can consume such components, but it can't actually generate components that can be consumed by others.
Right.
There are, of course, rules around this. You know, there has to be some sort of limitation. We have to have some expected capability that's exposed up and some common types that are shared across these elements. So, for example, public fields, properties, and arguments have to be Windows runtime types.
Right. Not custom types and
Not
things
custom
that don't
types.
belong across all languages.
So I can't create a class and expect to return that class type and expect that to appear across everything.
Right.
Because there's no projection mechanism that will take that and put that everywhere.
That's right.
Public classes and interfaces cannot be generic. So again, it has to be strongly typed.
Right. This is definitely a .NET mechanism or a capability that doesn't speak to other languages like C++.
Yeah. Public classes can't derive from non-runtime types. So again, we can't introduce some sort of complex class and try and
Sneak it in.
sneak it in there. It's just not going to happen for us. We also can't implement non-runtime interfaces. And again, that's pretty self-evident. You know, we can't share something that isn't common.
That's right. It has to be understandable by the consumer.
We also can't try and obfuscate what it is that we're doing, i.e. we can't inherit or try and pretend that we're part of the Windows subsystem by having a namespace that says Windows.Jerry's funky control library.
Funny enough, and not because you used my name there, but funny enough, in .NET you actually can. You can create a class or an interface and put it in system. And even though it's not injecting it into system, it does add it to that namespace for your scope.
Indeed.
The final one and the important one, we kind of mentioned it earlier in the mind-boggling thing, is, go ahead, sorry.
Public classes must be sealed.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, there is no inheritance or extension that you can do from these shared components. So again, you know, these things are encapsulated and delivered for consumption only.
So all of these rules allow projection, and projection is taking it out of WinRT into the consuming language, into types that it recognizes. So
yes.
There are certain types when I'm in C++ that simply don't show up in .NET.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have different types. I never see those types. When they're projected into .NET or C# for me, it's in .NET types that I know and love, right? And I don't have to worry about recasting. Often I do when I work with COM directly. This is how it kind of varies from normal COM interop.
Mm-hmm. So, let's have a look at some examples.
Yeah, this will be cool.
So what I have right now is a completely empty Visual Studio environment. Good.
Good. You're gonna write this from scratch?
I am.
Because I write all mine from scratch, and I know
Exactly.
that you were saying that you could do anything I could do better.
I think that goes without saying. And that includes screwing up. So, I'm going to create just a blank XAML app. So I have a solution, and now I'm also going to add something else. So I'm going to go add, new project. I'm going to come down and check other languages, and I go to Visual C++. And we see inside Visual C++ there is Windows Store. I could create XAML apps with C++, which is pretty amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, it really is.
Brand
new. This is a new functionality.
Yep. I can create DirectX apps, which is obviously what most games are going to be. You know, real hardcore AAA titles are going to be based around this infrastructure. Or I can come down and say Windows Runtime Component.
Okay.
So I am going to imaginatively name this as a component.
Now, interesting. You could also choose this from C#. This
or
as
Visual
far as
Basic.
WinRT component.
Or Visual Basic,
Right.
absolutely. And so, to run with that for a second, you may have a C++ application that's tuned around performance. But you may want to implement some business logic using some of the syntax that's available within the C# language.
Yep.
So you could create that business logic component in C#, expose it out as a component that is consumed by C++.
Yeah.
Absolutely no reason why you couldn't.
As you create these components, one of the things to consider is the target user. There might be some issues around capabilities that you have in one or the other, because it is language dependent. Some things you can do in C#, or some things you can do in C++ that you can't do in C#. Some things for sure you can do in C# that you can't do in C++. And if you find some of those limitations, you might think that you want to have both of your components, both the native and the managed, in the same project. Mm-hmm. But because there aren't referential aliases, as there are on other types of projects, so in Windows 8 apps you can't do aliasing for resources or for references, that you can't have two of the same namespace.
Yep.
So you have to think that all the way through and either make them separate namespaces or make them in enough parity that you don't need both at the same time.
Absolutely. So what I have now is a solution that has my component as a C++ project, and I have a C# project. There was a time not too long ago where we couldn't have multiple language types sharing a solution.
Yeah.
You remember those dark days of despair?
Yeah, back when we had to dial a phone.
Indeed, indeed. So what I can do here is I'm in my C# Windows Store app. I can add a reference. If I come in and look at projects, I can select my component. If I do that, I've now added and imported that and made that available within the context of my C# app.
Now, if you had created a standard C++ library, that import would have been far more challenging.
Yes.
And it would have also not given you the option if you had created a store app in JavaScript.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So now that I have that, I should be able to reference, should be in the operative word, my class 1 that sits within that component.
So right now you're in C#.
I'm in my C# environment. So here's my component namespace. and there is class 1.
There it is.
Now, because I'm nowhere near as brave as Jerry, I'm not going to go in and dive in and create a whole bunch of C++. I'm going to, now that I've demonstrated how easy it is.
That's bravery, is what that is.
Some call it bravery, some call it foolhardiness.
Yes, yeah, let's go to the prepared back. This is like Julia Child's.
Exactly. And here's one I prepared earlier, children.
Exactly.
And so what we have here is a C# environment, Prime Calc client. Try and say that quickly.
No, I don't want to.
This has a reference out to C++ mathlib. If I look at C++ mathlib, then we have quiet in the cheap seats, thank you. I have no idea and I don't want to know. If we open up Prime Calc, we can see we have a whole bunch of C++ logic that's around prime number calculation.
Got it. Which prime number calculation, by the way, not all that simple, but an excellent example of how to tax a system, because calculating the prime number takes a lot of work.
Absolutely. So if we open up back in our C# Windows Store app, we can see that we have yet again another glorious UI that people labored for minutes over in terms of building this capability. And what we have is a series of algorithms that are going to run. Some of them are implemented locally in C#. Some of them are going to call out to the C++ library. So we can kind of get not only a demonstration of the capability, but a demonstration of calling some asynchronous operations.
Yeah.
And also get a visual that really represents the difference in performance
Pretty cool.
of the two systems.
Pretty cool.
So if
so C++ should be faster.
It should be.
All right, let's see.
If it isn't, then somebody's wasting an awful lot of time.
I know, that's right.
Okay.
You'll never get it back.
So if we look at, say, the button one click, this is doing a native object, compute result. So if I go and have a look at that definition, here we can see this is the export view of our C++ math library. And so this is how the metadata gets projected so that I can consume this from C#.
Yeah, amazing.
Pretty neat. If I look down at another of the click events, we can see that there are many references out to C++ mathlib, prime calc. And then we finally have down here C# primes click, which is going to generate the prime numbers actually within this code logic.
Yeah. So this is the non-native implementation.
This is the non-native implementation. So let's just run up the application and take a look and see.
I've got my money.
Oh, let me actually start the right one. That sounds like a wonderful idea.
I've got my money on the native implementation.
You do?
I do.
You're a brave, brave man.
Native. C++.
Yeah, but you didn't see me embed all the weight states in there? Because C# is a winner.
That's the best way to win.
Exactly. Stack the deck. So, got to compile C++.
That's a little window that managed developers aren't accustomed to seeing.
No, and you see it all too often.
In C++.
In C++, in this world. So, what we're going to do is we're going to run synchronous logarithm output calculation, which does a very, very quick response out to our library, just returns back a basic set of numbers.
That's a kind of hello world to prove that the WinMD is actually functioning.
It certainly works. So now we're going to generate a set of ordered prime numbers.
Go.
And bam. As we can see, that's generated a large number of numbers very, very quickly.
Was that native or managed?
That was native.
All right, so here it comes. Don't blink.
Now this is still native.
Oh.
This is going to be still native, but it's unordered, which is going to be even faster.
Oh, I see.
Now what we've done here is we've done it asynchronously, but we have progress reported, which is why we're seeing these things updated, and we're seeing these things being thrown down. Look at that, it's just incredible.
And unordered, you can do it like that, where you can just kind of sample it along the way. Yeah,
exactly. It's a cunning thing.
I see why you did it, yeah.
And now we have C# generating it.
Still blazingly fast. Even still blazingly fast.
It is incredibly fast.
How many more numbers is it calculating than the native one?
It's about 1/10.
Is it really?
No, it's actually generating the same amount. But we can really see that performance difference. So let's revisit that.
A great thing here is it could be worth the hassle of writing some of your logic in C++.
And, hassle depends upon your perspective. If you're really comfortable writing C++, Why not?
I'm glad you said that. You're right. It would only be a hassle if you don't know C++.
Yeah. I mean, again, here's the performance of C# running.
I'd like to see all three of these side by side with JavaScript. I'd like to see that. Just that would finally end the conversation.
Yeah. And now we run the C++. Quite significantly different.
So nice. So nice.
And so, there's real value here. And I think one of the great things about the App Store ecosystem, WinRT and so on, is you really have all of these options to choose what's best for the domain in which you're working in. Mm-hmm. If you need something that's going to be high performance, if you need something that's going to crunch a bunch of numbers and you want to get that back to the user as quickly as you possibly can, you have the option to default to native implementation. Equally, if you want to use the flexibility of perhaps a more expressive type system, more expressive development environment such as C# can offer in certain scenarios over C++. Although I have to say, C++ has evolved dramatically over the last few iterations. There's a lot of capability that's been introduced that really do extend it.
sort of went to sleep for a while, and there wasn't a lot of evolution.
It did, and I know Microsoft probably got a bunch of stick for that. Mm-hmm. I would say it probably went to sleep around 2006. Yeah. There was not much innovation around that.
In these last couple of years, it almost makes you wonder if you should learn C++ as your primary language. It would so much talk about it.
Exactly, that or JavaScript.
Yeah, right.
Or not. But that's not to say that JavaScript isn't a very important language in the space in which it works well.
No, you're totally right. I shouldn't. You're right. You're absolutely right. Thank you for recovering that.
You're more than welcome.
All right, let's talk about.
You can go back to abusing Norwegians now.
Yeah, only you know who uses JavaScript.
Norwegian fish
They know who uses JavaScript. All right, let's look back at what we talked about. Earlier, we were talking about the difference between the two types of controls, or reusable controls, that you can have in XAML, both custom controls that usually don't ship with their styling, or they might, but they are easily retemplated, and then user controls that include both the logic and their look and feel, and we showed that you can data bind to them very easily as long as you have the syntax, right?
Exactly. As long as you actually understand dependency properties, it works really well.
You were showing Windows Runtime's components, and I said WinMD, and those are the same. A Windows Runtime component has a WinMD file extension.
Which is MD is effectively Windows metadata?
Right. And that allows you to take and write the logic in the language that's appropriate, right? So you may already have investments in C++. Honestly, you're writing a game, you're interested in doing it in Java, in HTML5, but you want to keep your logic still in C++ and not change all that because you've made the investment and you want to keep maybe a consistent code base across all your different platforms. This is a way you can do it. Just put it into a WinMD component.
Perfect.
Excellent. We'll take a 10-minute break. We'll come back. Let me see. Bam, bam, bam. And we'll talk about camera and media when we come back. Ooh. And a little surprise as well. We'll see you in 10 minutes.